today, Councilwoman Mary Lupien and I, because we are calling for a U.S. Department of Justice civil rights investigation into law enforcement response to the protests regarding Daniel Prude. I'll let Mary speak, and then I'm going to speak, and then we'll take your questions.
Thank you all for being here today. You know, since September 2nd, the community found out about the killing of Daniel Prude by the hands of the RPD. They have been expressing their First Amendment right in peaceful protests and have been met by a militaristic and severe response by the RPD, by the state troopers, and by the Sheriff's Department. We're calling for an investigation into this response. You know, there have been tanks and dogs, pepper balls, pepper spray, tear gas, and really disproportionate response to peaceful protesting. And these are chemical weapons that are being used against our people. Our people are not the enemy, and we are not at war. You know, City Council is looking into who knew what when, but we don't have the capacity or the bandwidth or the know-how to do this kind of investigation. And so we really need outside help, and the Department of Justice is the appropriate entity to do this investigation. You know, we've had reports of people being hit in the body by pepper balls. You know, these are people who are protesting. These are elders. These are elected officials, myself and Rachel included. You know, the policies and procedures say that you shouldn't hit anyone in the body unless there's an active threat of harm to the police. But I was hit walking away while filming. You know, journalists have been hit. This is an inappropriate and really an overstretch of our officers who are here to protect and serve us. And that's why we are demanding this investigation. Rachel?
Yes. We have seen a disproportionate response to a few protesters who may have thrown bottles or other objects at police. That does not give police license to open fire on hundreds and thousands of peaceful citizens. That's what police have done. In response to minor threats, police have opened fire with pepper balls and tear gas on hundreds and thousands of people. We have reports of very serious injuries. At least one person is going to lose an eye. We have reports of other serious eye injuries, broken bones. I have a concussion. Mary Lupien and I were standing right on the front line at barricades with police not 20 feet in front of us. And they shot pepper balls right at us, right at our heads, right at our shoulders, at our bodies. We weren't doing anything wrong. This is dangerous. To fire indiscriminately at a crowd of people is so dangerous. Now, we know police know how to respond with restraint and to de-escalate and to make sure that everyone is safe. We know this because we saw it from September 6th to September 11th. And then on Saturday night, on September 12th, we saw an escalation again. We saw militarization. We saw people arrested who were just filming. This is inappropriate. And the reason we're asking the Department of Justice to investigate is we believe an outside agency is the most appropriate to address this situation. That's because they have the resources, the capacity, and the expertise that we simply don't have in local government. The other reason is that we were assaulted by our own government. We don't know if it was Rochester Police, State Police, Monroe County. We need an outside investigation into what happened here. Citizens who have been peacefully protesting their government do not deserve to be treated like this. In America, you should not have to don safety goggles, helmets, shields, and gas masks to protest your government. But that is exactly what our neighbors have had to do over the last couple weeks in order to be heard. And it's very inappropriate that law enforcement is casting people wearing defensive equipment so that they're not shot or gassed in a negative light. We have to stop the false equivalence between armed agents of the state, whose responsibility it is to protect us, and peaceful citizens. They are not the same. The police have a huge responsibility here, and I understand this is complicated. I understand it is difficult, but the results are unacceptable. We will take your questions.
When do you expect, have you sent the letter, when do you expect a response, and then a time frame for when something may happen as far as the investigation?
So the letter is going out today. I'm having someone else print it. The letter's going out today. We also shared it with Congressman Joe Morelli and Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Chuck Schumer. Their offices have confirmed receipt of the letter. So we're hoping that they're able to get support for this investigation.
Any time frame, though, these can take a while, right?
I don't know. I mean, nothing moves quickly, but we're also hoping that by seeing our call, that the Rochester Police Department and other law enforcement agencies think twice before escalating conflict.
You said it was a disproportionate response. What is the appropriate response when someone does launch something toward law enforcement or does try to reach the barrier? What's an appropriate response?
Mary, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can tell you that an appropriate response is not firing on an entire crowd with pepper balls and tear gassing them. You know, we have seen police have restraint when things have been thrown, and the protests have ended peacefully. You know, when officers respond, you know, the crowd defends themselves, and you know that's when you've really seen the larger things being thrown, like the fireworks. But when police have shown restraint and not acted, the crowd, you know, the crowd polices itself, if you will. You know, there's a chant that they say, "We keep us safe." And if you give them a chance, they will tell each other, no, that's not what we're doing here, and that's what we've seen in the 5 days of peaceful protests. But when something is thrown and the crowd is immediately fired upon, they don't have a chance to do that, and it immediately becomes a dangerous situation where people can get hurt.
So you're saying the crowd has done a good job of trying to identify those people
when given the chance? Yes.
I would just add that you have received the letter that we've sent to the DOJ. It has a lot of footnotes and sources that have been cited. You know, in those footnotes, you know, we have there were news reports that police fired pepper balls at a church where injured people were inside seeking refuge. How is that appropriate? How is that moral? Who is going to investigate that kind of conduct? We know that the federal government is very interested in citizens who have incited violence and who have thrown things at police. Well, they also need to be interested in police who have acted inappropriately. We saw the other night on September 12th, we pulled video of a law enforcement officer, I don't know what agency, it's not clear, in an armored vehicle pointing a weapon at citizens. We've seen video of officers throwing tear gas at reporters. There needs to be a thorough investigation into what has gone on here. Who is policing the police? Who is in charge? Who is calling these orders? We have absolutely no idea, and we're elected officials. This isn't normal, and this isn't right.
I will say that I have asked to put a hold on body cam footage and blue light cameras, because the blue light cameras especially, they cycle over 30 days, so it's important that we put a hold on that and we don't lose the evidence. And I have asked on social media for anyone that has evidence of police response that is inappropriate to send it to me. So I've been collecting videos and photos.
Don't forget Wednesday, too. About Wednesday's event, you might want to talk.
Oh, yes. And City Council on Wednesday is holding a listening session specifically for citizens to come out and express how they're feeling and testify to what they've experienced in the Daniel Prude protests and how they'd like to see our city move forward. That's 5 o'clock on Wednesday. It's going to be a Zoom a meeting, and you can find out more on cityofrochester.gov/public meetings.
And just one other point, because I feel that we always have to make this point, even though we really shouldn't have to. Of course, we don't condone any violence. We don't condone protesters throwing things at police. But we also have to demand that police react proportionately and also don't engage in violence that is completely unnecessary. We definitely have seen unnecessary violence over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. And it should also be said, you know, an investigation into protests being deemed unlawful. It's a sacred First Amendment right for people to express how they're feeling against their government and to peaceably protest. And from what I've witnessed and from what reports have shown, the decision to deem protests unlawful and to disperse has been done from one water bottle. And you know, the criteria is really much higher, threat of violence and you know, imminent danger, and that is not what we have seen here. And so at the point of dispersal is when you see so much violence against protesters. And so we really need to do an investigation into who made the call and what is the justification for deeming these protests unlawful.
So, Mary, you believe that city council, not city council, but RPD lied to you last night?
When you say lied to me?
Meaning they claimed that they had the authority against rocks or bottle bottles, things like that, fireworks, to declare a protest unlawful.
Right.
So that's, you don't believe that they were
so you know, there's a lot of discretion when it comes to policing, and so when you have the threat of imminent danger, the police, maybe they made that judgment call because they felt a water bottle was eminently dangerous. But the investigation into the actuality, you know, of a reasonable party to determine whether or not that's true, whether or not that fits within the criteria, I think that lies with the Department of Justice.
And I can't emphasize enough that Mary and I are elected officials, and last Saturday night we were standing at barricades just like this with our hands on the barricades, looking into the faces of police officers who were not 20 feet away from us. We were standing with pastors, we were standing with senior citizens, we were standing with elders, and police looked dead at us and opened fire at us. I don't understand how that happens. And if it happened to us, you better believe it's been happening to lots and lots of other people. And it's not right.
There was scrutiny around pepper balls after May 30th. What happened months after that, RPD loosened its policy that allowed for more officers
Yes.
to use them.
Yes.
When do you think these things should be utilized, if at all? What do you think the power should be?
Well, I think the Rochester Police Department should follow its own protocols on pepper balls. When I was reading those protocols a couple days ago, it's very clear that there were multiple violations, including shooting at protesters' heads and shoulders. This can cause serious injury, and we know that there have been serious injuries, not only across the country, but in Rochester. People are going to lose their eyes because of this conduct.
Yeah, and I would say that I would be in favor of banning that kind of response. Pepper balls and tear gas, you know, tear gas and pepper spray, there isn't a lot of evidence for it, but there's studies now being shown that they can affect the reproductive systems of women. We really don't know the full extent to what these chemical weapons are doing to our population, and the indiscriminate use that we're seeing it can really be detrimental to our population. And I will say, you know, short term, the police may be concerned with clearing the streets, but long term, this kind of militaristic response and treating the people as an enemy is sowing long-term division in our community, long-term hatred of the police department. I met a young man within the first week of protesting, and he said to me, he's like, I'm tearing up, and you may think it's from the tear gas, but I'm crying. I didn't know whether or not to come down here. I didn't know what to think about the police, but I've never felt so hated in my life. And then he is firmly, and I've seen him every night on the front lines, he is firmly in the camp of F the police, if you will. We are turning people who are middle of the road into putting them into polarized camps, either for or against, and that is not healthy for our community. We have to treat our people as citizens, and the police have to really understand that they're working for us.
Yes, and I also really resent the rhetoric that we're anti-police. I think we're very much in favor of systemic reform. We're in favor of putting resources into preventing crime, into things like housing, education, jobs, mental health care. That doesn't make us anti-police to say that we recognize that there's something wrong with our current system. I don't, you know, when I talked about the individual officers who fired at us, I would like to know who made the order. I would like to know how something like that happens. And I don't think we're going to get those answers from local officials. I think we have to go outside of Rochester, frankly, outside of New York State, to get those answers about what happened here.
Has there been any time where you feel the use of tear gas or pepper balls were justified even when larger fireworks were being thrown, or really has it all been like disproportionate?
I have not seen any video from the. I was only there the one night, but I will say that night, absolutely not. Nothing happened.
And I will tell you that every time something larger, like a firework or an incendiary device, has been thrown, it's been after the police have thrown tear gas or started pepper bulleting the crowd.
And also remember too that we're talking about crowds of thousands of people. It's not realistic for the organizers to know everyone's in the crowd and to be able to control everyone in the crowd. They are very much in favor of nonviolence, but you can't respond to everyone because of just a few bad actors. And that's what we've seen here. Nor should we be trying to delegitimize an entire movement by placing scrutiny on a few people. We should take the scrutiny that we're placing on individual protesters and you put that same scrutiny on police. I don't think police could hold up to that scrutiny either. And so there's just these really false narratives and false equivalence that's being perpetuated here that is very harmful, because we have a lot of people who are being hurt, and we are trying to elevate their voices today, and we are trying to get answers. And don't forget, these protests are against police. So when you have people who are showing up to protest police and they're met by an extreme militaristic response, when they're met by an army of officers, which is totally inappropriate given the situation, given the peaceful response from protesters, that is something that instigates. It absolutely is. And as Mary said, it is something that hardens people and radicalizes them against police. And that is not what that is not an outcome that any of us should want.
And I was just going to say, and I think we have to dig into the systemic nature of the fear that police have of this community. You know, the militaristic response is really telling in how they view our people that are coming here and, you know, defending this building, the public safety building. What do they actually think is going to happen? You know, and coming in from outside of our city and systemically how they view people of color in our city, I think we really need to dig into why they're so afraid of us.
Who lost or is losing their eye? I believe it's
you would want to contact Don Thompson. He is a local attorney. He's also representing Joe Prude. He is collecting the stories of dozens and dozens of protesters who have been injured in the protests. And at this point, he says they're so overwhelmed, they're only focusing on serious injuries. And he did identify 2 serious eye injuries. One person will be losing their eye. I believe, do not quote me on this, but I believe that they will be filing a lawsuit to at least try to get to restrain police from using these devices.
As you said, thousands of people were here, or 1,000, 1,500 for different words. How do you guys know what everybody in the crowd is doing?
Well, we don't, okay? But I can tell you when we were fired upon, we weren't doing anything. And I will also say that there are, in this wonderful age we live in, tons and tons of live streams from many different angles, and I have yet to see conduct that justifies hurting large groups of innocent people where there is no activity taking place. So there was the Friday night, there were a lot of people saying they were trapped on the Court Street Bridge and they were tear gassed. I know a lot of the people who were trapped on the Court Street Bridge, their grandmothers, their moms and dads, and I don't understand why they were gassed. It was a terrifying, terrifying experience for them.
There's also been calls for escalation to protest this week.
I don't know what that means.
From protest leaders last night.
Yes, I don't know what it means, though.
Well, I would assume increasing their tactics. I would assume more frequent protests.
I think our local protest group, Free the People ROC, they are very savvy and they are excellent organizers. And I think that the fact that we haven't seen Rochester burn down, that we have not seen the level of violence that we've seen in other cities, is a testament to them, and they deserve a tremendous amount of credit.
Mary, can you talk quick about the city council investigation, just the latest on that? I know there was council hired recently.
Yeah, I don't have all the details, but you know, it's going to be looking into administration and council to see who knew what when, and whose statements were factual and not.
When do you think that'll really start to ramp up?
I don't have a time frame.
Do you know why you hired Andrew Selby, but then you have Linda Kingsley as pro bono? why is there money? Why can't this be done pro bono through their England? What's the money going to be costing?
I don't know the answer to that.
And I just want you to know too that I'm a county legislator, and I will be probably with a couple other legislators asking the sheriff for an accounting of what the department's involvement in the protests was. That's just something I don't know in terms of personnel, equipment, costs, etc. I would like to know.
Is that too, any idea on the overtime cost and other costs going into this yet?
I know we were somewhere around the 500,000 mark on August 27th, and it's been quite extensive. I've heard officers that are on 18-hour shifts day after day. So that with the payback for the state and federal, whoever's here assisting in the sheriff, it's going to be massive, and over $1 million, I'm sure.
Is that since May 30th or just since the past those 2 weeks now?
Well, the 500,000 was as of August 27th, and I'm assuming that it's inclusive of May 30th. The response since, I would probably estimate that it matches that.
And also, what's your best case scenario in getting the federal government involved first?
I don't know. This is new territory for both of us. We're hoping that Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand, along with Congressman Joe Morelli, may be able to help get us an answer on whether the Department of Justice will pick this up for us, or maybe offer some nudges to do it. But the bottom line, if we don't have success there, we may turn to the state. But the bottom line is we do need answers, and I know journalists will be also filing FOILs, and our own elected legislative bodies will be asking questions, but we just really believe there needs to be an outside investigation. And the best outcome, frankly, is if police continue to handle protests the way they did from September 6th to September 11th. Those nights were peaceful, they were restrained, and I would like to see that continue.
Other cities, I believe Seattle and Portland, have also asked the Department of Justice to investigate their police responses. But, like Rachel said, this is new territory, and I think we need to wait and see what happens. But we're leaning on our allies in the federal government to push for this.
I would also add about those other cities. Those other cities actually had federal agents taking part in the police response, so they were able to get the Inspector General to say, yes, we will investigate. We are not aware of that in Rochester, so we decided to go the Civil Rights Division route instead. It's possible that we may have to go to a different agency, but I'm not aware that federal agents are on the ground here participating in these protest response.
Is there a concern that could happen if somehow this escalation, if it just escalates however it escalates, is there a concern that we could get?
Sure, I don't think we're at that point. That our protests compared to some other cities have been extremely mild.
I think it's on everyone's mind, though, seeing what happened in other cities. And, I believe one of the first couple of days, it was rumored that one of the organizers was picked up on his way here by an unmarked plainclothes officer, but, unclear as to what branch of government that was, but he was charged with inciting to riot. And that's something that we as City Council were wondering, some other fellow council members, is how are they charged with inciting a riot if no riot occurred?
Has this person been released?
They've been released.
They would know what government, what agency arrested them, right? If you've been...
Yes, I haven't gotten in touch with that person yet.
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions that you're asking us really show the need for an investigation. When even journalists don't know a lot of basic details about what has happened here, that's very alarming. We should be able to know how many officers, from what agency, who's calling the shots, how many people were injured, how many officers were injured, how many protesters were injured. We should have all of that information at our fingertips, and we just don't. And I think that's very alarming, and we're going to need an outside investigation to get those answers. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And your newsroom should all have the letter that we sent, and just let me know if you don't have it.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.